Hello and welcome back to another episode of Ruining Your Childhood.
Welcome back to another episode of Ruining Your Childhood, one sculpt at a time. Today we're going to be taking one of the dumbest pure beings ever created and dragging him straight into Uncanny Valley. A lovable little meat glob, no thoughts, no bones, just vibes. So today we're going to be sculpting Meatwad. Every masterpiece starts off with a ball of aluminum foil. I'm just crumpling it up into a perfect Meatwad shape. We then coat the whole thing in some liquid Sculpey, also known as the liquid of the gods. Once that is thoroughly coated, I covered the whole thing with a flat, even layer of clay. I cover the entire thing with a flattened out layer of clay, rolling it nice and tight until the foil is completely sealed. I make sure to get rid of all the wrinkles and air pockets to ensure our little meat glob doesn't crack in the oven. These are some pre-baked eyeballs I made earlier by rolling out a ball of clay, then slicing it in half, mashing those into position. With his eyes firmly fastened to his face, we could start building up the eyebrow ridge. I do this by adding a few little dank nugs of clay right above the eyes. Moving down beneath the eye, we go ahead and add these little pieces of tapeworm. These are there to help build up the lower eyelids. This helps to blend everything together and starts to give us that uneven, meaty texture that we're looking for. We're really trying to go for that processed food look, you know what I'm saying? Once all that eye meat is properly mashed, it's time to carve in that smile. I use the ball styles here to scoop out a little smile, just enough to give him that classic Meatwad expression. I also went ahead and pre-baked a little tooth off camera using some translucent clay. I'll take that little buck tooth and shove it right in the center of the mouth. I then take another piece of clay, laying it right over top, building up the upper lip, locking that tooth in place. I then take my small ball stylus, going over top of the upper lip, giving it that meaty texture that we're looking for. With his face done, it's now time to give his body some substance. I start out by dropping little nugs of clay randomly around the surface. This is just to help give him that globular look that we're going for. And with his mystery ball lumps all in place, I could go in with a variety of different ball styluses. Starting from big to small, I smash them along the surface, leaving these little craters and dents, making him look a little bit more squishy, uneven, meaty-like. And to push up the realism, I followed up with a natural sponge, pressing it and dabbing it into the surface to give it a little bit more grit. I then found this little half foam thing and rubbed that across the surface, and it gave it a nice little texture as well. I'm really just making things up as I go here. And just to finish things off, I go ahead and go around with a silicone sculpting tool and some ball styluses just to punch up the detail a little bit more. Now that Meatwad's all textured up and he's looking pretty good, we could go ahead and make it a little bit more nasty by adding those little fatty chunks, I guess, that they are. All those little white dots around him. For this, I'm going to be using that translucent clay, the same one I used for the tooth. And we're just going to be sticking this in around the body randomly, just to add those little nasty fat pores. I don't know exactly what they are, but I think it's the same exact thing that they fill Slim Jims with. Ugh. Another thing that makes Meatwad a little disgusting is that he has all these little hairs sprouting out of him. So for this, I'm going to be trying something I've never tried before, and it's I'm going to be using static grass, and I'm just going to be sticking it into the surface of the clay. Now, what makes me think that these are going to survive the oven? I don't think, I just do. So with all this meaty texture and his hair in place and our fingers crossed, we're gonna go ahead and stick it in the oven for the first bake. And the hairs survived. Honestly, I was pretty shocked by this. I did not think this was gonna work, but as we just try things, you never know until you know. Now with Meatwad completely baked, we could go ahead and start the painting process. We're gonna be doing something a little bit different with this paint job, something that I've never done before actually, but we're gonna be building up a bunch of different washes. Starting with just a burnt sienna wash, we're gonna give it a nice coat, then go over top with some reds and different yellows, just to make this thing look really disgusting. This project low-key was probably one of my favorites I've done so far, just because I've got to experiment with a lot of different techniques. I always like to try new things to push my artistic abilities. In fact, this whole channel exists because of that. The very first thing I ever actually tried really sculpting was the very first video on this channel. And you might be wondering what made you think that you could start a whole channel off of something you've never done before. And honestly, I have no clue, but I'm very glad I did. Anyway, enough of me yapping. Now that we got the base coat of this thing completely coated, we could then go back over those little fatty spots with some isopropyl alcohol just to make sure that we don't have any paint on it. And to make this thing pop a little bit more, we're gonna go over top of it with a dark brown wash, making sure we're slapping it on there nice and sloppy like, letting it drop down into all those little pores and recesses and cracks just to make it pop just a little bit more. After we let it dry for a couple seconds, we go ahead and wipe the top surface off, leaving those nasty details. And to finish off Meatwad's meat bod, we're gonna go ahead and just give it a quick dusting with a khaki dry brush and just going over the surface to help blend everything together. And with Meatwad's meat suit looking quite disgusting, we could go on to his eyes. To start things off, I'm going to be painting them with an off-white. The color I'm using is called Parchment. I use it for literally all of my off-white. You probably hear me talk about it a lot if you've been here a while. I also give a little bit of a wash of the same color over top of the tooth, followed by a pink wash over the eye, dabbing out the center, then reintroducing that off-white. I did want to give a little bit of color to his eyes, so we are going to be painting them with a dark brown. Once I got that completely filled in, we could go in and add black for his pupil. So far, everything was looking pretty good. I just wanted to make those hairs pop a little bit more, so we're just gonna be going over top of them with some black paint, just so they could stand out a bit more. And to really amplify the NAS factor of him, we're gonna be using some of this Super Gloss Brilliant Extreme Mod Podge. We're gonna be really watering this down, then painting it over top of the surface just to give it a little bit more of a sheen and make this ball of meat look extra glossy and wet. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna go ahead and finish him up off camera, but in the meantime, we could go ahead and start on his base. We start things off with a piece of EVA foam that we're gonna be covering with this hard felt. Now in the show, in their house, they have this nasty green carpet, and I feel like this is actually perfect for that. So after gluing it on, I'm gonna be taking the side of my X-Acto knife and scraping it across the surface. This is gonna be loosening up the fibers and giving it a somewhat textured, almost carpet look, as you can see here. So after I just go around the whole surface, roughing it up, we got ourselves a nice little green shag carpet. I was pretty happy with how this came out, so we could go ahead and set that aside and then start on the little elements that we're gonna be scattering around the whole base. Now I want this thing to be covered in some junk food, so we are gonna be adding some pop cans first. I went ahead and rolled out a little cylinder of clay, cutting it to the right size, then taking a small ball stylus, I go ahead and punch in that little drinking hole. I upgrade my ball stylus to a slightly bigger one to make the top a little deboss. I then create a little tab for the top, attaching that with the ball stylus. We got ourselves a little pop can. Went ahead and made a few extras off camera. Now we can move on to the next item. Starting with a little block of clay, I mash into this rough bag shape before cutting off the ends to make it more square. I then take my fingers, pinching off one end to give it that sealed look. To give the bag a little bit more texture, I just use the back end of my X-Acto knife to give it some ridges. Then as for the open end, I'm gonna go ahead and slice out the innards, flicking out that inner bit. Now just go ahead and pinch off the tip slightly just so it's a little open. And we got ourselves a nice little chip bag. And of course the chips that are gonna be spilling out of the bag are gonna be Doritos. What's your favorite kind of Dorito? Now that I have those Dorito shapes all cut out, we could go ahead and just take this rough sponge and just dab it on the top to give it that chip texture. I went ahead and baked all these little pieces real fast, and now we could go ahead and start painting them. I went ahead and went for this dual screen action where we're painting both items at the same time. Obviously, one side being the chips and the other side being the cans. There's really nothing much I can say about this. I'm just going through trying to paint these details on as nice as I possibly can. Trying to make the Dorito bag look like a Dorito bag and the cola can looking like a cola can. And then once I was happy with how those items came out, we could go ahead and kind of start dirtying up this mat a little bit. Went ahead and went with a brown wash, and we're just gonna be painting this on. I also thought it'd be cool if one of these pop cans looks like it's spilled, so we're gonna lay that on top, slopping this stuff on, trying to get all the edges and just doing little spots here and there to give it a little bit more grime. And with that, we have all of our pieces completed. After a little bit of assembly and some off-camera detailing, we're on to those glorious JCPenney glamour shots. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and also leave a comment down below of who you would like to see me sculpt next. I'll see you next time.